Welcome everyone to the high-level political forum side event, Child and Youth Experiences and Activism for Achieving the SDGs and Promoting a Fairer and Greener COVID-19 Recovery for All. My name is Yassine Khalifa and I'm a 17-year-old Year 13 student at Nord Anglia International School in Dubai. And I will be the moderator for this event hosted by UNICEF and a coalition of child-focused agencies, including the Child Fund Alliance, Save the Children, World Vision, Plan International, and SOS Children's Villages, as well as Nord Anglia Education. The COVID-19 pandemic has magnified existing social and economic disparities and inequalities across the world, bringing the scope and urgency of the issue to the forefront. Not only has the pandemic laid out these inequalities on full display, but it has also exacerbated the existing gap. As a result of this, the pandemic could have a lasting impact socially, economically, mentally, and physically, in particular on vulnerable and marginalized groups. For this reason, the pandemic cannot be separated from the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure that no one is left behind. In order to build back better, fairer, and greener, there must be a collaboration between nations and generations. Today's event aims at providing a platform for children and young people to share how they are contributing in their communities, their ideas and asks, as well as hearing about good practices from leaders. The structure of the event includes remarks from UNICEF, the government of Spain, an interactive dialogue with young advocates, and to end with, we have an artistic presentation. Before we begin, I would like to remind the audience that simultaneous Spanish translation is available throughout the presentation. I would now like to introduce UNICEF Executive Director, Ms. Henrietta Fore.
Thank you very much, Yasin. And may I say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, to Your Excellencies, to ladies and gentlemen, but most importantly, hello and welcome to all the young people and children who have joined us today. This is one of the most important and unique events in the entire high-level political forum because it puts your voices at the center of discussions. Kanban, Chloe, Tamara, Camilo, Tayata, Faye, and Yeshe, we are so honored to have all of you here, and we cannot wait to hear your ideas and experiences and to talk to us about what needs to be done to get the world back on track towards achieving the SDGs. We are also happy to be joined by Ms. Ione Belara, the Spain's Minister of Social Rights and the 2030 Agenda, a very important minister. She will share her government's experiences in integrating child and youth voices into Spain's national processes for bringing the SDGs to life. This meeting comes at an important time. The last 18 months have been a very challenging time for all of us due to COVID-19. But UNICEF is especially worried about the effects on children and young people. Lockdowns, school closures, isolation from friends, worries about the future. Children and young people are facing these challenges during a critical time in their learning and development. But I've also been inspired by their bravery, their resilience and innovation, by their willingness to reach out to their friends and peers to help them, and by their dedication to helping their communities combat COVID-19. We've seen young people volunteering to distribute masks, food, and sanitation and hygiene products to vulnerable communities, and helping to stop the spread of misinformation about the virus online. And even during the pandemic, children and young people never lost focus on the need to fight climate change and environmental degradation. From the climate strikes in the streets to online activism, young people continue to sound the alarm and demand urgent action and accountability from leaders. You are the change makers, the influencers, the inventors, and the partners in achieving the SDGs. And that is why we need to do more to make sure that your voices and ideas are heard at the decision-making tables. Here at the UN, we have created increased space and opportunities for youth engagement, especially over the last few years. And we won't stop because we need to do more to involve younger children, those under the age of 18. After all, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the most widely ratified human rights convention in existence, guarantees children's right to be heard on issues that affect their lives. So for the adults participating today, let's do more to increase children's participation in platforms and in processes in the UN. And let us work with governments, local and national alike, to help them include the voices of children in the decisions affecting them. Finally, the foundation for activism is awareness. All children globally should learn about their human rights and the SDGs and the relationship between the two. After all, you all who are young people, you represent the world of the future. You deserve a hand in shaping that future. And that's why today's event is so very important and why it's so inspiring to see so many people of all ages come together. So next time, Yasin, I hope that we will gather in person. But thank you, and I look forward to the rest of today's event.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. ED4. It is very important that national plans, the implementation of the SDGs, and the voluntary national review allow for the inclusion of children's rights and young people's voices. And for this reason, I am pleased to introduce the Spanish Minister for Social Rights and 2030 Agenda, Ms. Lone Belara, to hear what her country is doing and what others can learn from that.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. I'm going to speak in Spanish because I think there is translation, but I'm very pleased to be here with everyone. Buenos días a todos y a todas. Es un placer para mí estar participando de este foro. Quería saludar en primer lugar a Henrietta Ford, la directora ejecutiva, y también a cada uno de los activistas que estáis participando tan jóvenes en este foro. Quería saludar a Yasin, a Can, a Chloe, a Tamara, a Camilo, a Fai, a Jessie y también a Tayata. Muchísimas gracias por vuestra participación. Tengo la suerte de haber comenzado mi activismo desde muy joven en una organización como Cruz Roja Juventud y creo que ese aprendizaje, haber comenzado el activismo muy joven, es uno de los mejores aprendizajes que he tenido en la vida, tanto para mi vida profesional como para mi vida personal. Por eso, mis primeras palabras son para animaros a que continuéis en el activismo, porque ese aprendizaje es muy valioso para todas nuestras vidas. Precisamente, creo que la Agenda 2030 es el paraguas, el aprendizaje que nos sirvió a muchos de nosotros y de nosotras que habíamos comenzado desde el activismo social, desde el antirracismo, desde la lucha por la vivienda digna, desde la defensa de los servicios públicos. Todos esos aprendizajes encontraron un paraguas, un buen nicho acogedor para seguir defendiendo lo que nosotras consideramos que es un proyecto de país y un proyecto de planeta. La Agenda 2030, los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, son ese paraguas que nos permite luchar juntas y luchar juntos por un mundo mejor, por un mundo más sostenible, por un mundo en el que no haya desigualdades y en el que todos vosotros y vosotras vais a jugar un rol imprescindible. Porque creo que los y las jóvenes muchas veces sois nombrados como el futuro de nuestro planeta y en concreto de mi país, de España, pero vosotras estáis haciendo parte del presente de nuestro país y de nuestro planeta. Y yo quería, en primer lugar, daros las gracias, porque creo que estáis siendo un ejemplo. En concreto, en mi país, son los jóvenes y las jóvenes quienes están impulsando el movimiento por la defensa de un planeta más sostenible, gritando, como en tantos otros países, que no existe un planeta B, un planeta de repuesto. Pero también en mi país el movimiento feminista es muy importante por los derechos de las mujeres y del colectivo LGTBI. Y ahí los y las jóvenes están jugando un rol absolutamente imprescindible. Por eso, en un momento en el que se están cuestionando en el conjunto de la comunidad internacional los derechos de las mujeres y los derechos del colectivo LGTBI, el impulso de los y las jóvenes está siendo absolutamente imprescindible para seguir construyendo sociedades con más derechos y con más libertades. Creo que si hemos aprendido algo de este durísimo año de pandemia es que cuando las cosas se ponen muy difíciles es lo público y es lo común lo que nos protege a todos y todas. Eso es lo que hemos aprendido en España y precisamente creo que tenemos que construir un país y una sociedad a nivel internacional que cuide de lo común, que cuide de nuestros sistemas públicos, de nuestros sistemas sanitarios, de nuestros sistemas educativos, pero que también proteja el planeta y construya un modelo económico que respete los límites del planeta. Señalando con este objetivo que señala precisamente la Agenda 2030, nosotros hemos trazado una hoja de ruta que debe ser la hoja de ruta de la recuperación, que es la primera estrategia de desarrollo sostenible que ha aprobado por primera vez España. Estoy especialmente contenta y orgullosa de poder presentarnos al examen nacional voluntario en el High Level Political Forum con esta estrategia nacional aprobada y sobre todo con una estrategia que es una estrategia de país, porque en ella habéis participado y han participado sectores muy amplios de la sociedad. Estamos especialmente orgullosas de que haya habido dos mecanismos de participación. Por un lado, una participación de niños y niñas en colaboración con UNICEF, a quien quiero darle las gracias especialmente a UNICEF España por esa colaboración, y también una participación de jóvenes a través del Instituto Español de la Juventud, que nos ha permitido tener una mirada desde los jóvenes y desde los niños y las niñas que es fundamental. Además de esto, hemos tenido una aprobación muy importante en estos años en España, que es la aprobación de la primera ley contra todas las formas de violencia hacia la infancia. Esa ley crea por primera vez el observatorio, el Consejo Estatal de Participación de la Infancia y la Adolescencia, y creo que ese Consejo Estatal de Participación va a jugar un rol fundamental en que todas las leyes que se aprueben a partir de ahora en mi país tengan a la infancia y a la adolescencia en un papel absolutamente protagónico, porque los niños y las niñas tenéis que participar no solo de las políticas de infancia, sino de todas las políticas, porque todas las políticas públicas os afectan directamente. No quiero alargarme más, pero sí quería agradeceros la participación en este foro. Creo que representáis lo mejor de nuestro país y lo mejor de la comunidad internacional, siendo personas jóvenes que estáis implicándoos en el cambio social y político y que estáis promoviendo un planeta mejor, una sociedad mejor para todos y para todas. Yo creo firmemente que con vosotros y con vosotras sí vamos a poder construir sociedades mejores donde la gente pueda vivir mejor, pueda vivir vidas justas, pero sobre todo, como siempre decimos, pueda vivir vidas felices, porque creo que todos nosotros y nosotras tenemos el derecho a ser felices, cada uno de vosotros y vosotras tiene el derecho a ser feliz. Con ese objetivo tan ambicioso trabajamos y un placer estar aquí para escucharos. Muchísimas gracias.
So is this the moment? Is this the moment to try to translate?
No, we have already the interpreter in the room. Thank you, Paloma.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lunbalara. Now I'm excited for us to transition to our panel, where you'll be able to hear what children and young people from 6 different countries are doing to implement the SDGs and the recovery from COVID-19. Today's panelists are Can Van from Vietnam, Chloe from the United States, Tamara from Brazil, Camilo from Colombia, Faye from Indonesia, and Yeshi from Bhutan. To begin our panel, I would like to ask you all, what inspires you to engage in your community and what actions are you taking? Can Van, would you like to answer first?
Trước kia trong công đoàn em không có nhiều hoạt động cho trẻ em ngoài việc vui chơi và hỗ trợ bố mẹ các công việc. Ngay cả việc vui chơi của em cũng khá hạn chế. Do người lớn thường nghĩ các trò chơi thể thao là dành cho con trai và con gái chỉ nên làm các công việc nhà. Cho nên là em và các bạn nữ rất ít khi được chơi thể thao. Các bạn nam thường không cho chơi và xin bố mẹ để chơi thì cũng khó. Nhưng rất may mắn là bố em đã tham gia dự án Back với vai trò là huấn luyện viên. Bố em đã hiểu hơn về bình đẳng giới và bỏ đi những định kiến cũ. Việc trở thành một cầu thủ bóng bầu dục rất tuyệt vời đối với em. Em được học hỏi được nhiều kiến thức ở nhiều lĩnh vực và các kỹ năng sống. Mỗi khi có đợt tuyển cầu thủ mới thì em thường rủ bạn bè của mình cùng đăng ký tham dự. Em đã tham gia nhóm làm phim của dự án kết nối tiềm năng lãnh đạo. Trong dự án đó em đã học cách làm phim và đã cùng các bạn trong nhóm dựng 2 bộ phim ngắn phản ánh về tình trạng ô nhiễm môi trường và một phim về ước mơ thực sự của các bạn đồng trang lứa với mình. Ngoài ra em còn tham gia trong nhóm trẻ nòng cốt của dự án để nói lên ý kiến về những vấn đề an toàn cho trẻ em. Ví dụ như những địa điểm không an toàn hoặc các trường hợp bạo hành trẻ em để các bác lãnh đạo có lưu ý và có những biện pháp xử lý.
Hi everyone. I am the interpreter of Pune. Now I is translation. Hello everyone. My name is Ben. I live in Vietnam and nice to meet you today. About my activity in my community. There are not many activities for children in my community except playing with friends and supporting parents to do housework. But even for playing, it's quite limited for girls because the adults often think that sports are for boys and girls should do only housework. So sometimes it's very hard to girls if they want to play sport. And when we want to play sport with boys, they don't let us play. Fortunately, my father participated in the project of rugby named Pass It Back, PIB, as a coach. Through it, my father understood more about gender equality and it changed his mind. So he often encouraged me to participate in more activities in my community and become a rugby player. Being a rugby player is so great to me because I can play the sport that I like and it's helped me to expand a lot of knowledge on gender equality and child protection. I also joined a filmmaking team of the project named Connecting and Creating Leadership. And as a part of this project, I and my team made 2 short films. One about the environmental pollution in my area, and one is about the real dream of my peers. I also participated in a group of children who raise our voice on some program of the children in my area, and we will share our view with the authority and the leader in my community who can help us to make the decision to resolve our problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kanvan. That leads us on to you, Chloe.
Yeah, so I think I'll start from the beginning here. So I initially got involved in social justice when I was in 8th grade after the Parkland shooting where 17 students were shot in school. And this event really made me realize the importance of social justice. And because of it, I ended up getting involved in many other issues ranging from homelessness to gun violence to feminism. And as I was learning about these issues, I ended up having this realization that somehow they all connected to the environment. And this was really interesting to me because I had never seen an issue this intersectional and interdisciplinary and international as the environmental crisis is. So I kind of realized like, okay, I need to get involved here. I need to be a part of this solution. So I ended up starting a sustainability club in school where we took different actions to help make my school community more sustainable. And I also joined some other organizations such as the one which runs all the climate protests in Chicago, where I'm from. But through this, I kind of realized that all too often, education and action were seen as separate entities, when in reality, they need to work together hand in hand. So it's for this reason that myself and my partner, Georgia Scar, expanded our school club into an international organization, which is now known as EcoCircle International. So EcoCircle International is a youth-led nonprofit which bridges the gap between environmental education and tangible action. And we do this through our podcast, our blog, our forum, but also our fellowship. And that's really our main initiative. And this is an education and action-based course for youth ages 12 to 18. And it's currently available in North, South, and Central America. But at the moment, we're collaborating with youth in various other regions. So in a year from now, we should hopefully be in 6 continents, which is definitely really exciting. And the whole point of this fellowship is to connect education and action. So it consists of 3 months of environmental education, but then an independent initiative where each student identifies a problem in their community, then using the skills that they learn in the fellowship, they take action on this to address their local problem. So through our whole fellowship, we're keeping the mindset, think global, act local at the forefront of everything and ensuring that education leads to action, because that really is the key with the environmental crisis.
Great, thank you, Chloe. Tamara, your turn. What inspires you to engage in your community and what actions are you taking?
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to translate to Tamara from Portuguese. Tamara, you can deliver your speech. Você pode falar o seu texto.
Bom dia, meu nome é Tamara, tenho 17 anos, estou representando o Brasil e a visão mundial.
Good morning, my name is Tamara, I'm 17 years old and I'm representing World Vision in Brazil.
Vou falar o meu texto. Desigualdade e discriminação é toda manifestação que evidencia entre os povos suas diferenças, de uma maneira violenta.
Inequality and discrimination is any manifestation that shows the difference between people in a violent way.
Subestima o que há de mais valioso no indivíduo, sua humanidade.
That underestimates the most valuable thing about the individual, his humanity.
No Brasil, a cada 23 minutos, um jovem negro é assassinado.
In Brazil, every 23 minutes, a young black man is murdered.
A cada 4 minutos, uma mulher é agredida e a cada 8 horas, uma é assassinada.
Every 4 minutes, a woman is attacked and every 8 hours, one is murdered.
Em 2019, se registraram 17 mil casos de violência sexual contra crianças e adolescentes.
In 2019, 17,000 cases of sexual violence against children and young people were registered in the country.
O Brasil lidera o ranking mundial de assassinatos de transexuais e travestis.
Brazil leads the world ranking for murder of transsexuals.
Não é fácil enumerar tantas violências e tanto assassinato em um discurso tão breve.
It's not easy to enumerate so many murders and violence in such a brief speech.
Não são só números, e sim vidas, onde as mortes estão acontecendo neste exato momento enquanto discutimos sua importância.
It's not just numbers, but lives, where the killings are happening right now as we discuss their amount.
Isso prejudica também diretamente uma grande parte das crianças e adolescentes que crescem em territórios mais afetados.
This also directly affects a large part of the children and young people who grow up in the most affected territories.
Que são alvos da desigualdade e da discriminação e atrapalhando seu desenvolvimento educacional, sua saúde mental, seu futuro.
Who are targets of inequality, making it difficult to develop in several areas, educational, mental health, and their future.
Porém, não há como falar de discriminação e desigualdade sem lembrar de quem sofre com tudo isso. Não podemos ignorar tanta dor, devemos acreditar que sempre há esperança.
But there is no way to talk about discrimination and inequality without remembering who suffers from all of this. We cannot ignore so much pain.
Estamos reunidos para pensar também em novas formas de solucionar um problema que é real em nosso país.
We must believe that there is always hope. We are together to think about ways to solve a problem that is real in our country.
Para que todo ser humano seja respeitado pelas diferenças que carregam.
so that every human being is respected for the difference they carry.
Espero que consigamos pensar em soluções juntos e considerar a existência de todos que são invisibilizados por tanta injustiça.
I hope we can think of solutions together and regard the existence of everyone who is made invisible by so much injustice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Camilo, that moves us on to you. Would you like to answer?
Vale, muchas gracias. Primero que todo, buenos días a todos y todas. Mi nombre es Camilo, tengo 16 años y vivo en un territorio que tiene muchas singularidades de otros países y a nivel mundial, en el Pacífico colombiano. Un territorio sumamente pobre, sumamente inequitativo, sumamente desigual, donde tenemos que vivir a diario con niños y niñas que tienen que padecer hambre, con niños y niñas que se mueren por no tener acceso a la salud y que no pueden entrar a la educación superior y muchas veces a la educación primaria. Y que el conflicto armado nos tiene al borde de la muerte día tras día. Y es eso lo que a mí me inspira, o lo que a mí me inspiró en mi momento a tratar y empezar este activismo. Y es desde ahí donde lo primero que empezamos a decir es cómo eliminar la desigualdad. Y la desigualdad y la pobreza que vive en nuestros territorios, que vivimos a nivel mundial, la empezamos cuando nosotros somos los mismos voceros para empezar a participar en los espacios políticos y democráticos, en esos espacios donde se toman decisiones y donde se concertan. Por eso, una de las acciones que hemos empezado a decir con nosotros a nivel colectiva y individual es hora de participar. Por primera vez hemos logrado que los niños, las niñas, los jóvenes y los adolescentes nos tengan en cuenta en los planes de desarrollo municipal y departamental. Y desde ahí donde también hemos empezado a consolidar esos colectivos activistas para decirle a nuestros gobernantes que tenemos necesidades, a empezar a intervenir y empezar a incidir en esos planes de políticas públicas para disminuir esas afectaciones que acrecentan en nuestros territorios. Porque si bien en mi territorio tienen esa misma singularidad, hay centenares de territorios más que también tienen que vivir afectaciones por falta del abandono estatal, de la desigualdad y de la pobreza en general. Y desde ahí donde nos hemos tocado como niños, como niñas y como jóvenes, y a decirnos, hay necesidad de hacer algo en nuestros territorios para cambiar estas realidades sociales, para decir no más a la violencia contra la niñez, no más a la violencia contra los adolescentes y contra la juventud, contra las mujeres, contra los niños y contra cada una de las personas en general. Así que, nada, hemos buscado participar totalmente en cada uno de los espacios de participación política y dejar ahí la voz de los niños y las niñas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Camilo. Faye, could you please answer now?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I think I can take the same approach that I think Chloe did earlier in talking kind of about how we started in the very beginning. I'm the founder of a nonprofit that works to eradicate child trafficking, exploitation, and abuse in Indonesia. And the way that we started was there was no plan to start an actual organization, but we really wanted to make discussion groups because I had grown up kind of in more rural areas of Indonesia, and there were really, really high rates of child sexual exploitation in the area, as well as child sexual abuse. And a lot of the children didn't know their own rights. They didn't know that child trafficking was a real thing. And so a lot of them had fallen victim to child trafficking, child exploitation, and child abuse without realizing that they were victims because they didn't know their own rights. And so they would become victims, they become vulnerable to other types of abuse of, children's rights abuses, and all the while didn't know because a lot of cultural and systematic failings in Indonesia in which children were viewed as objects, in which the law until 20 19 considered 16-year-old girls able to be married, but the minimum age requirement for men was 19. So there's a 3-year difference there. And that child marriage is still legally permissible in court in Indonesia if you go through religious reasons. And so there were all these different kind of ways where children were being kind of subject to abuse. And a lot of the children didn't know their own rights, didn't know what the law said. And so at the end of the day, didn't even know how to report if a crime happened to them. And so Rumah Fe really started because a lot of, unfortunately, I have to say, a lot of my friends became subject to such abuses, became kind of victim. And so we ended up having to do a lot of kinds of intervention with organizations. Unfortunately, a lot of the organizations didn't always go with the approach of talking straight to the children first, right? There was no peer-to-peer discussions. There was no peer-to-peer organization. It was straight to adults. And while that's obviously a very important part of the child's community, of making sure there's a long-term impact, if you don't involve the most vulnerable population in finding a solution for an issue, whether that's a social issue or if it's environmental or it's any type of issue that's plaguing the world right now, no long-term impact will be made, right? It's about facilitating and empowering grassroots leaders. And so Rumah Fe was started in 2013 to ensure that there was a more comprehensive approach to anti-trafficking efforts. We started not only from the grassroots, but we started from the grassroots children, and we would stay at one place for over 6-7 years because we believe that, for us to want to make long-term impact, we have to stay for a long time as well. It's not a one-time workshop, come and talk, but it's a discussion. It's building skills, not only telling the children, it's equipping them with the skills to identify and to report cases of trafficking, as well as protect themselves from such cases to happen to them in Indonesia. So since then, Rumah Fe has grown a lot. And in 2016, we've been able to open our very own safe house in Batam, Kepulauan Riau, which is the northern tip of Indonesia. And we're able to help give children legal aid, medical aid, counseling, and facilitate their recovery, their road to recovery before they exit their safe house. So since 2016, Rumah Fe has been honored to take part in the recovery of 142 girls and 6 babies. And that's kind of where our work focuses on, is peer-to-peer discussion, it's child empowerment, it's ensuring that youths are not only participatory, but they're also given the skills to be, to kind of use the skills that the opportunities they've gotten to make a better life and to make the children around them safe.
Thank you, Faye. And lastly, but definitely not least, Yeshi, what inspires you to engage in your community and what actions are you taking?
Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this inspiring event. I'm indeed delighted to be representing my fellow Scoutmates and young people of Batam and share our experiences during the pandemic. I'm happy to inform the floor that so far Batam has been successful in containing the pandemic, and this has only been possible because of the visionary leadership of His Majesty our King and the collaborative efforts of the government, frontline workers, and all the citizens. His Majesty is the epitome of selfless service, who has always dedicated his wisdom at the service of his people, and his selfless service to his people and the trust that he bestows upon us, the young people, as the future of the nation, always inspires me to contribute in the best of my abilities back to my community. So just like anywhere else around the globe, Batam has been impacted by COVID-19, and there has been some challenges, of which the major ones include, firstly, embracing the new normal. The pandemic has called for a drastic change in our lifestyles, and the frequent hand washing became more important than ever. Movements were restricted. We had to maintain safe distance, and wearing face masks became a necessity. So people needed to be informed of the virus and the measures we could take to keep it away. Now, most of all, the greatest challenge and the fear amidst all these were the fear of complacency of the people in adhering to the COVID protocol, which could fail all the efforts that have been put in by every person. So The second one also, it is that of the mental health, because of the drastic change in lifestyle and multiple misinformation that was spread through social media platform. It has built in the stress, multiple forms of stress and anxiety in people, which has led to a rise in the mental health issues. And thirdly, digital divide. The education system, it has witnessed the grievous impact of the pandemic, because the schools had to be closed. So while the government, they had resorted to e-learning, the digital divide was a hurdle. Though some enjoyed learning and having their classroom just one click away, there were people, the students at remote communities who were facing difficulties in their learning because of a lack to access to power, internet services, and then the inability to afford the learning tools, or meet the service charges. So even with the increase, the access of access to internet, there was also the risk of online abuse and exploitation, and it also furthered the chances of school dropouts and early marriage because of the impact of the pandemic on the livelihood and the family income of the people. So BSA, that's a Bhutan Scouts Association, in collaboration with UNICEF Bhutan, we have engaged young people into various activities in the community so as to ensure their safety and well-being. Around 1,000 Scout members, they were, which covered 15 districts, were mobilized and trained onto reaching out to the communities and the young people on the key messages about COVID protocol, and especially how to seek support on the COVID triggered issues, especially that of mental health. And Scouts also initiated a project called Community Learning Project, which is what the Scouts in the communities, they supported the young children so as to address the challenge of digital divide. And also around 10,000 young people have been reached through our scouting network by social media posts, stories, short documentaries, which were created to create awareness about COVID. So as a result of all these, around 100,000 young people and their families members were reached and been informed of the COVID protocols and the measures they could take to avoid it. Now, through the Scouting Network, we have engaged young people in educational programs, which not only kept them occupied during the pandemic, but also guided them onto how to deal with the situation. So with the collaborative effort of Bhutan Scout Association in support from UNICEF Bhutan, through the young people, we have been able to touch lives and made a difference and contribute in our own ways to our common fight against COVID-19.
Thank you, Yechi. Kanban, another issue you care much about is education. We know that access to education has been critically affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In your opinion, what type of educational materials would you like to access online to support you with your education?
Trong thời gian Covid, em phải tự học nhiều hơn nên rất cần cái tài liệu học tập.
During COVID-19, my school was closed, and by the social distancing policy in my community, in my country, I have to stay at home, and I had to study more by myself. So I need access to internet to get material, especially online.
Mặc dù điều kiện về cơ sở vật chất hạn chế, gia nhà không có internet và cũng không có máy tính, nhưng em có điện thoại để kết nối 3G và em có thể lên mạng để tải các tài liệu học tập cần thiết.
I don't have the computer and internet at home, but I have the smartphone and I can buy data to connect the internet, and I can download the study material.
Nhưng có một bất cập là có quá nhiều các thông tin trên mạng và em không biết tin tưởng vào trang web nào và có an toàn hay không.
There is too much information on the internet, so I don't know which website to trust and is it safe or not for me.
Các tài liệu online bằng âm thanh thì sẽ tốt hơn các tài liệu bằng hình ảnh.
So I need a suggestion on the good and safe website to access and which website I should follow to learn and where can I download the educational video and audio.
Các tài liệu bằng video thì sẽ tốn dung lượng. Điều đó đồng nghĩa với việc em sẽ phải trả nhiều tiền hơn.
I think that audio is better than video because it takes less data than videos. It means I don't have to pay much money for the data.
Hơn thế nữa mà màn hình điện thoại còn nhỏ. Nếu mà nhìn lâu thì em sẽ bị mỏi mắt.
Moreover, the phone screen is too small, so my eyes will be tired when I have to look for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanban. Chloe, you have co-founded a youth-led organization that focuses on teaching children and young people about climate change and the environment. From your experience, what are the biggest gaps when it comes to climate education in schools? And what support should children and young people receive from governments and the UN?
Yeah, so I think honestly, sometimes it's not even that there's a gap, it's that it's just not being addressed in school. And many students just don't know anything about the environmental crisis, and it's not their fault. There are definitely schools who are taking credible actions. And over the last week, I've gotten to speak to different Nord Anglia students who are all taking action within their schools and integrating it into classes, establishing environmental councils. But this isn't happening everywhere. It's actually happening in very few places. So I think the first step is really just making sure that learning about the environment and climate change is a part of the school curriculum and ensuring that every single child is learning about these things, because going forward, sustainability is going to be crucial to all of our lives and all of our jobs and our home life and everything. So it's for that reason that every student needs to learn about it. And then with regards to what we want from government and the UN, I think really just to get our voices not only heard, but actually listened to, because all of the youth who are, in any movement that any of the panelists here today are talking about, or any other social justice movement as well, we all have certain experiences and we want these experiences to be understood. So we need more youth voices in the government, in the UN, and we need these youth voices to be consistent. It can't just be like a one-time type of thing. It needs to be a consistent partnership and a symbiotic relationship between the adults and the children, where both ends are learning from each other, because we all have so much to learn, but so does everyone else. So if we can all learn from each other, that's how we can really make a foundational change to ensure that everyone's getting the right climate education, and to ensure that this is becoming just a part of society and an integral part of society. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. Tamara, what are your top 3 ideas for engaging children and young people in achieving justice and equality for all?
Primeiro, a participação e envolvimento de crianças e adolescentes em políticas públicas, porque não melhor do que as próprias crianças para falar suas necessidades.
First, I think that the participation and involvement of children in public policies, because there is nothing better than the children themselves to talk about their needs.
Segundo, criar estratégias para tornar mais atrativo para as crianças essa participação política.
Second, seek strategies to make this participation more and more attractive for children to feel active in politics.
Terceiro, utilizarmos a educação como ferramenta de enfrentamento à discriminação, tendo em vista que as crianças vivem muito tempo da sua vida na escola.
Third, use education as a tool to fight discrimination, considering that children live a good part of their lives in schools.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Camilo, considering the major effects that COVID-19 is having and will have on the lives of children and youth, What do you think governments can do to mitigate these effects in terms of social inequality and poverty reduction?
Vale, muchas gracias. Como primero, creo que simplemente es ver a los niños y niñas, jóvenes y adolescentes como sujetos de derecho. Y simplemente que en todos los países garantizarlo el acceso a los derechos, a educación, a salud, a calidad, y a cada uno de esos derechos que tenemos como ciudadanos en medio de nuestros países. Como segundo, creo que los gobiernos deben potenciar los desarrollos, los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible en cada uno de nuestros países, ya que estos nos podrían ayudar a reducir la desigualdad y promover la inclusión social y política de todas las personas sin importar su nacionalidad, religión, etcétera. Ninguna de esas diferencias que tenemos como seres humanos. Como tercero, creo que se deben promover las políticas públicas que ayuden a la disminución de la desigualdad, pero sin duda que esa participación en esas políticas públicas que se creen en cada uno de nuestros países deben estar con la participación de los niños, niñas, jóvenes y adolescentes de todos los tipos de nacionalidades, pero también de todos los tipos de contextos que tienen nuestros niños en nuestros países. En medio del COVID-19 y en medio de esta pandemia, las brechas cognitivas de niños, niñas, jóvenes y adolescentes han incrementado y han profundizado en cada uno de nuestros países. Y es desde ahí donde los gobiernos deben intervenir en desarrollo infantil temprano para empezar a disminuir esas brechas cognitivas que hoy en día existen, incluso por la falta de calidad de educación y por esas afectaciones sociales que hemos tenido en medio del COVID-19. La eliminación de las brechas de conectividad, de salud, de calidad y de cada uno de esos derechos en general, para no extenderme, entre la zona rural y la zona urbana es necesario empezarlas a disminuir o eliminarlas de una vez en nuestros países. Sin duda que los gobernantes deben empezar a eliminar esas brechas tan grandes que hay entre la zona rural y entre las zonas urbanas. Y se deben empezar por eso a tomar decisiones con enfoque diferencial desde los gobiernos, con enfoque diferencial frente a las etnias, frente a nuestros países y frente a cada una de esas necesidades distintas que tenemos frente a los contextos en nuestros países. Sin duda, creo que lo principal que se debe potenciar desde los gobiernos es el diálogo entre los niños, las niñas, jóvenes y adolescentes con sus gobernantes. Y es desde ahí donde podemos empezar a hacer cambios distintos.
Thank you, Camilo. Faye, you have been part of Indonesia's youth consultations for the Voluntary National Review, or VNR. Why is it important for children and young people to be part of the process? And what support do children and young people need to meaningfully participate?
Yeah, it was a really, we were honored to be able to take part in the VNR process. It was my first time personally, and it was a really wonderful way for us to see that a lot of us actually share the same frustrations, that we could platform issues that are very hard to talk about in our country, shrinking civic spaces, failing sex education, youth unemployment, domestic violence, issues that are quite taboo that we could speak straight, into this VNR consultation. Was it perfect? Not necessarily. I think echoing what several of our other panelists mentioned, a lot of this youth participation is sometimes, it's not consistent and it leans heavier to one side. And I think it sometimes go both ways, where sometimes there's too much of a focus on what adults really can learn from children. And I don't mean it's too much as in we shouldn't. I mean, it's too much as in we're not equipped with the skills that we need to use that properly, right? So something like a VNR, it's picture perfect, especially with, the pandemic going in and, even without a pandemic, you can see all the children together doing a consultation. But what happens after, right? How are we keeping our government accountable to facilitate the action that we're taking? in my own experience, the safe house that we run in Batam, in the area, 3 safe houses closed, and the government body's agency safe house also decreased in their capacity, and Rumah Fe had to take double the amount of kids into our safe house. So in years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've only taken 19 to 25 children at one time during the whole year. But throughout the pandemic, in all of 2020 until December, we had to take 42 children, the youngest, who was 4 years old, a victim of child sexual exploitation. And so in this kind of thing, the VNRs need to have clearer next steps, right? And not only clear next steps, but clearer facilitation of how we can use that properly. You know, it can't be a one-way street. And so I think issues like this, it's incredible to see, you know, the government taking great steps and, you know, engaging youth, engaging civil society organization, but it also needs to, you know, go hand in hand with equipping youth to use those types of opportunities properly. And you know, again, I think it was mentioned earlier, not only hearing, but also taking real action from the words that we say, right? So I think youth participation is absolutely essential moving forward in terms of advising on policy, advising on legislation, and it has to be consistent. It can't be just something for a photo op. Just equipping us with the skills to make sure our activism is sustainable. I think there's sometimes too much focus on the word youth activism instead of activism as a whole, because once we turn 19 or 20, suddenly it's not, you know, valid anymore, because we're not youth activists, because we're not sellable, we're not marketable. And I think that's something really, really interesting to change, to see. So I think there has to be a focus on sustainable activism, sustainable youth you know, participation, because you're not only equipping us to make change now, but you're equipping us for a lifetime of activism.
Thank you, Faye. And again, lastly, but not least, Yeshi. As a youth scout engaged in the COVID-19 response in your country, what have been the top 3 challenges and the lessons learned from your engagement?
With the onset of unending virus, one question that burns our mind is, what has and will the pandemic do to our young people psychologically? Well, it's true that the circumstances of COVID has left an impression of which we are yet to face the full effect. And the experiences of the COVID has ranging from our ages. It has ranged from, you know, very little awareness to a total or complete cognitive dissonance of what we thought of a normal school would look like. So the way we cope with the new environment and the circumstances around has become a very personalized choice. We now have to weigh our options and face big decisions on, you know, going ahead, about how to go ahead, and also keeping in mind all the safety measures that we would have to put in for the benefit of all and for the public health. So it's very tempting to go towards the negative aspects of what the pandemic did to us. But as a young person, I'm challenging myself to look onto the positive aspect that it has to offer, you know, and the lessons we could have learned, and we did learn from the pandemic. Now, from several of the benefits that I account to as a blessing in disguise, you know, from the pandemic, today I would like to share with you all 3 key lessons that I have learned from the pandemic. Firstly, it has made me realize and contemplate the Buddhist philosophy of impermanence and interdependence, which has not just been a moment of realization, but also a source of inspiration to keep moving and keep fighting the virus. The devastating effects of the pandemic that it had on the lives of the people has fairly demonstrated the idea of uncertainty of life, and it has made me appreciate and enjoy every moment that I get to live. The systems that work for us are dependent on others being healthy and in a position to do the job. So this makes it all more important, you know, for all of us to consider ways we could help each other and then be good stewards of the resources that we are afforded. Secondly, adaptability. So despite the drastic change that it has brought in our lives, we as Scouts have been able to process problem solving and find new ways to adapt under this circumstance. Since life is simply not going to adhere to our expectation and not going to go as planned, the development of ability to adapt positively is a skill that many of us have tried to master it at some point, and I'm glad we did it through pandemic. We are now very much positive and creative in our approach to just everything. Though it was a little uncomfortable at first, we now find great joy in finding new ways to accomplish things we want and we need to, while still staying safe and in compliance with the COVID protocols. And lastly, the most important of all, that is the value of unity and solidarity. For a very small kingdom like ours, the greatest strength that we had during the pandemic was that of the unity. So everybody united in thought and in action to combat the COVID-19 has made the efforts of His Majesty, the government, and frontliners a success. So unity was a great value lesson that I have learned from the pandemic. In situations like these, the way forward is not always clear-cut or easily agreed upon. But I think it's very important to reinforce the youth to move forward. We have to deal with the reality of the circumstances rather than wasting our time lamenting about the past or playing the blame game. We need to think very critically with innovation and a positive attitude so as to lay a positive and a firm foundation which would allow us to get through this. We can be sure that the generations that follow will have their own battles to fight and problems to conquer. But I hope that we'll look back at this time to see creativity, collaboration, and unity as a source of inspiration that just moved us forward to take us and walk beautifully through this, the journey of the pandemic. With this, thank you very much. It was nice meeting you all and sending best wishes and prayers from Bhutan. Thank you.
Thank you, Eshi. As I mentioned earlier, an important part to building back better is collaboration between generations. Our young advocates would also like to hear about the issues surrounding their areas of advocacy from leaders. To that end, I am happy to welcome UNICEF Director of Communications, Ms. Paloma Escudero, as well as the Cabinet Director of the Spanish Minister of Social Rights and 2030 Agenda, Ms. Sandra Estere. Camilo, would you like to ask your question first to Ms. Sandra Estere?
Vale. Bueno, muchas gracias, no había escuchado mi nombre, pero perdón. ¿Cómo promueven los gobiernos? Bueno, primero saludar. Y la pregunta es cómo promueven los gobiernos las buenas prácticas para que los niños, niñas y adolescentes se conviertan en actores importantes de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible.
Muchísimas gracias, Camilo, por esta pregunta. Permítanme 10 segundos agradecer la invitación a UNICEF y poner en valor el trabajo de UNICEF organizando un side event de este alcance. Y gracias, Yeshey, Chloe, Faye, Yassim, Camilo, Kanban, Tamara y a todos los activistas 100% inspiradores, todas vuestras propuestas, vuestras opiniones. Realmente este es el side event que creemos que hay que promover y que hay que apostar, en el que los niños y jóvenes tienen el liderazgo y que sus voces son escuchadas por los tomadores de decisión. Y permítanme rápidamente saludar a Paloma, compañera de UNICEF. En mi anterior vida nos hemos podido conocer un poquito, y a Shannon, un placer, Shannon, volver a verte por la cámara. Me gustaría abordar esta pregunta señalando que los gobiernos, especialmente los gobiernos y los partidos políticos, tenemos que dar un paso hacia adelante. Es decir, no solo definir, promover e implementar mecanismos de participación para los niños, niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes de nuestros países, para poder promover leyes y políticas que realmente aborden sus derechos, sino hay que dar un paso más y tenemos que entender que los niños, adolescentes, niñas y jóvenes tienen que ser un actor político con entidad propia. Este es el salto que tenemos que dar en los próximos años. Un actor político no solo para valorar, opinar, criticar y hacer seguimiento y rendición de cuentas de las políticas y las leyes de infancia, sino del conjunto de las políticas públicas que son necesarias llevar a cabo, es decir, desde una reindustrialización verde, desde el tema de la sanidad, hasta poder abordar cuestiones de biodiversidad o de economía o macroeconomía. Es muy importante que los partidos y los gobiernos demos ese paso adelante y hagamos esta transformación cultural de la política. Estamos siempre los gobiernos señalando que las voces y la participación de los niños y los adolescentes y jóvenes son fundamentales, pero necesitamos entender ya e incorporar que los grandes movimientos sociales, las grandes reivindicaciones de nuestro tiempo, los han liderado jóvenes, niños y adolescentes. Es decir, un ejemplo claro, ya lo dijo la ministra Belarra, es el movimiento global a favor de la protección del planeta, de nuestra madre tierra, de la biodiversidad y luchar contra esta emergencia climática. Este elemento lo ha puesto sobre la agenda pública global los adolescentes, los niños, niñas y jóvenes en el mundo. Otro ejemplo es, por ejemplo, todo lo que tiene que ver con la lucha feminista, los derechos de las mujeres y las niñas y adolescentes y los derechos del movimiento LGTBI en todas partes del mundo. Los jóvenes, niños y niñas, no entienden el presente ni el futuro sin derechos para las mujeres, sin derechos para los colectivos LGTBI, sin esta diversidad que es una gran riqueza. Y claro está, sin un planeta y donde habitar, ¿no? En el que poder seguir nuestro desarrollo. En ese sentido, nosotros estamos comprometidos en los próximos 2 años a dar ese paso hacia adelante en el que los jóvenes, niños y niñas y adolescentes no solo participen en mecanismos reglados, sino que sean reconocidos desde el propio gobierno como actores políticos fundamentales. Esto es lo que quería compartir con vosotros y vosotras.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Chloe, I know you also have a question to ask for Ms. Paloma Escudero.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for being here and allowing me this opportunity to ask the question. So how are you ensuring that youth voices in the environmental movement are not only heard, but actually listened to so that our knowledge and experiences translate into tangible action?
Well, thank you so much. And Chloe, it's very special for me to receive that question from you, because I know how much you have done in the US, that is the country where I live now. I would say that in the role of UNICEF, we always say we are sort of a convener. We are between the voices in the streets, the voices in social media, the activists of young people who you are really shaping the agenda on climate, but also we can convene how those voices of young people, those proposals of young people can be discussed at the negotiating at the power tables. And I'm going to share with you two examples of when we have worked very, very closely with all the, what we call youth, young activists. And I have heard very clearly, we have to consider if we keep calling you youth activists or just activists. So that's very good food for thought. But perhaps I was in COP Madrid a few years ago. I don't know, I have seen perhaps people who are listening and attending this very important meeting were also in Madrid. And I remember that we didn't have any high-level prominent representation from UNICEF. We gave our seats, we gave our representation to 13 youth climate activists from around the world. So instead of having our executive director, Mrs. Ford, that you have seen, or any other people, we wanted the young people to be representing UNICEF in the different debates, in the different roundtables. And also it was important for us to make sure that we convene the meetings between those youth activists and the ministers of environment who were negotiating during the COP in Madrid. And that was fascinating. I still remember one meeting with the environmental minister of France. It was a meeting that had been scheduled for half an hour. And I think it was most of the youth activists came with us to the meeting. Of course, the ministers were expecting us as UNICEF with our climate policy experts to be leading the conversation. And when we sort of stepped back and gave the floor and the seats, by the way, to the young people, of course, the way you master the information, the way you know your science, the way you talk in personal terms about the impact of the climate in your own life. We had kids, no, they are not kids anymore, but they were very young. They were 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old, from the Pacific Islands. We have children from France. We have children from Brazil. We have children from the US. I mean, nothing can beat the personal experience, the personal commitment, especially because you are talking with a lot of personal authority. And let me please echo what Sandra Stete just said. You change the debate on climate. After Paris Agreement, as you know, climate had disappeared from the public spotlight. And it was Fridays for Future, it was taking the streets with the climate message, who really make the political agenda to retake the issue. So I think that really our role is to convene, but also to amplify and to give you the platforms and to give you the support to make sure, as you say, that the voices translate into proposals, translate into solutions, and translate into being part of the decision-making conversations. The second example, and also I think that I see people here that know, is the support we gave to 17 activists who use one of the provisions of the Convention of the Rights of the Child to be put in a comment or a plea to the Committee of the Rights of the Child to consider that climate crisis was a child rights crisis, and that the lack of response of governments to tackle the climate crisis was a violation of child rights. In that case, what we did is the platform and the complaint was filed by the 17 activists, but we as UNICEF, it was, I remember still, the press conference was in UNICEF House in New York, but of course also we accompany on the technicalities and the expertise we have on child rights and child rights international legislation. And that was very important to be considering child rights as an integral part of the climate crisis, because that gave also the youth activists a way to integrate the discussion in any discussions in Parliament and beyond related to child rights, always talking about how the child rights are violated if the climate crisis is not tackled. So lots of examples of how we can convene, be part of, or accompany a lot of the efforts that, as I say, to be authentic, it has to be led by young people, and we can never replace that role as UNICEF, but we can support and we can amplify.
Thank you. Faye, you have a question as well for the government of Spain. Would you like to ask that now?
Thank you so much once again for allowing me the opportunity to not only share a little bit, but also ask a question. In Indonesia, at least, I think we would love to learn a lot more about the child protection laws that are implemented there. And Indonesia does have quite comprehensive laws, but I do think the implementation is where we fail. Sorry. So my question was mostly, how can the implementation of child protection laws be best monitored, and how can the public keep government agencies accountable to fulfill such laws and fulfill the rights of children?
Muchísimas gracias. No sé si lo pronuncio bien, Faye o Faye, muchísimas gracias, de verdad. Nosotros estamos como muy orgullosos de haber podido sacar adelante una ley, la Ley Integral de Protección de la Infancia y la Adolescencia contra todo tipo de violencias. Es una ley que ha tenido el máximo consenso de los grupos políticos, que para nosotros es un cambio cultural, es dar una seña clara, nítida a la sociedad española de que ningún tipo de violencia será tolerada. Los niños y las niñas tienen derecho a vivir una vida segura, una vida libre de violencias, una vida en la que puedan ser felices, ¿no? Este es nuestro principal objetivo. Para que esto se pueda hacer realidad, lo que tú señalas es fundamental. No solo el monitoreo, sino la rendición de cuentas desde el gobierno hacia el conjunto de la sociedad y en concreto hacia los niños, niñas y adolescentes de nuestro país, de que esta ley se está implementando y cumpliendo todas las obligaciones y artículos establecidos en ella. Para eso, este mes de septiembre sacaremos adelante el Consejo Estatal de participación de la infancia y la adolescencia. Es el primer mecanismo de gobierno estable e institucional en el que los niños y niñas tendrán representación para poder abordar, insisto, no solo el seguimiento de esta ley de protección, que es muy importante contra las violencias, sino el conjunto de las políticas públicas que atañen el presente y el futuro de nuestros niños, de nuestros adolescentes, niñas y jóvenes. En este mecanismo, este Consejo Estatal, se van a crear diferentes submecanismos o grupos de trabajo para que puedan hacer un seguimiento semestral, anual y pedir que el gobierno dé explicaciones del cumplimiento o no de las obligaciones que se establecen en esta ley. Estamos pensando hacer comparecencias anuales de la ministra para señalar qué se ha hecho y qué no, pero que también los niños, niñas y adolescentes puedan hacer shadow report o que puedan hacer preguntas concretas en cualquier momento del año. Tenemos que ir viendo los mecanismos para garantizar esta participación, monitoreo y rendición de cuentas del gobierno hacia los niños y niñas, pero también que los niños, adolescentes puedan señalar sus aportes, los elementos que consideran que no se están implementando bien, etcétera. Y si me permiten, creo que hay algo muy, pero muy importante en esta ley que para nosotros es histórica, que tiene que ver con la posibilidad de haber ampliado el plazo de prescripción. No sé si esto sucederá en otros países, pero en España una de las grandes trabas que tenían lamentablemente los niños, niñas y adolescentes que habían sido víctimas de violencia sexual es que el delito prescribía muchas veces después de que estos niños, adolescentes, cuando ya eran adultos, eran capaces de poder denunciar, ¿no? Se entiende que la gran mayoría de víctimas de estos terribles delitos de ámbito sexual necesitan un plazo amplio para poder asumir lo que ha sucedido, el dolor, y poder hacer las denuncias correspondientes. Y hemos logrado, y esto ha sido una batalla muy dura, de que el plazo de prescripción empiece a contar a partir de los 35 años, que es cuando los expertos y expertas en la temática nos señalaban que era el momento promedio en el que las víctimas de violencia sexual podían abordar esta problemática públicamente y hacer las denuncias correspondientes. Eso para nosotros es un paso hacia adelante muy importante. También, y solo ya termino con esto, hemos estado como muy sensibles con la situación de los niños y niñas migrantes no acompañados que llegan al territorio de España y que hasta hace muy poquito, hasta hace unas semanas, para la determinación de la edad de estos niños y niñas, se aplicaban algunas prácticas que tanto el Comité de Derechos del Niño como de la Convención sobre Derechos del Niño como la Defensoría del Pueblo de España se consideraban que no eran correctas, que no eran adecuadas, como prácticas de desnudos y exploración genital para determinar la edad. Y eso también ha sido eliminado. Se van a aplicar otro tipo de prácticas menos invasivas y violentas hacia esos niños y niñas que ya son vulnerables, que ya viajan solos y que vienen huyendo del terror o del dolor. Entonces, bueno, estamos muy contentos con esa ley, pero ahora tenemos el gran desafío, que es implementarla y hacerlo bien. Así que ahí esperamos que los niños, niñas y adolescentes de España en este Consejo Estatal, que por primera vez se va a crear, si me permitan la palabra en España, nos metan caña, nos presionen para tratar de hacerlo lo mejor posible. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. And Tamara, would you like to ask your question to UNICEF now?
Como eu mencionei na minha apresentação, jovens e adolescentes passam por diversos tipos de discriminação, do racismo até a desigualdade de gênero.
As I mentioned in my presentation, children face many different types of discrimination, from racism to gender inequality.
Gostaria de saber de que forma as crianças e adolescentes podem contar com a atuação da ONU no enfrentamento desses índices de violência.
So I would like to know how children and young people can count on the UN's role in confronting these levels of violence.
Well, this is I think that all of you, but also I think that ED4 and the Spanish minister mentioned the inequality discrimination of one of the key challenges that in a way also the pandemic has revealed. So for me, really I think that children and young people have to hold the UN accountable. I mean, if you go back to the Charter of the United Nations that I hope you have read at least once, that was drafted 75 years ago when the United Nations was created at the end of the World War II. But the Charter of the United Nations starts with "we the people." And the Charter of the United Nations says that human rights are above all, and that human rights are equal to every single human being in this planet, regardless race, gender, ethnicity, nationality, or beyond. So you say how the young people can make sure that the UN is true to its mandate. I think that that's, at this moment, it is enormously important that there is a moral voice, is an ethical voice that says zero tolerance and enough is enough. And the same on the any organization, any institution who has been created to defend the rights of every child. Discrimination, exclusion, of course, if I go beyond violence and others, cannot be tolerated, and cannot be tolerated by the law, cannot be tolerated by the official policies, but cannot be tolerated in the daily attitudes, in the daily social beliefs. And I think that for me is the more serious ones, that sometimes when we are talking about racism, about discrimination, I mean, you talk, all of you, I mean, Faye, the work you are doing in Indonesia, Tamara, the situation you described in Brazil with the violence, Camilo and others, we can put many laws and we can be, that cannot be approved by parliament. We can even establish policies, budgets, but the issue is at community level, at family level, the level of discrimination against girls, the level of discriminations about LGBT kids, the level of discrimination about Black people, Afro-Americans, minorities, indigenous. This is the day-to-day in our societies. This is why I think also that the UN, we need to keep raising awareness, naming and shaming in a way, but making intolerable and not acceptable a society in any corner of the planet that can discriminate, that can even have a violent approach to people, kids, because of the, and I would say it's not only gender, female, male, it's also, for instance, the treatment in so many countries with LGBT kids have still go to prison when they are underage for the sexual orientations and others. So if I can say, it's not only zero tolerance, it is that the United Nations has to say again and again, we the people, we all have equal rights. And there's no place for racism and for discrimination. And for me, this is the issue of our times. This is the issue of our times, and this is the issue that I see that again, perhaps will require social movements, will require the voices of young people to also teach something different. And let me perhaps finish, because I don't know why we have ended up with a Spanish panel, but I remember when I was in UNICEF Spain, we did this opinion poll among young people, and the younger kids, they were not racist, or they were not discriminated against migrant kids, by the way. You did a poll, 8 years old, 12 years old, 16 years old, no. You did the poll to the parents, and it was the opposite. The parents were the racist. So I think that for me, it's really to be building a more tolerant society, a more inclusive society. It starts with young people shaping the values of the society, and perhaps saying no to some of the prejudice that their parents were brought up with, or the parents are, or adults are consolidating in the day. So very important question, and thank you for asking me this question to end the panel today.
Thank you, everyone. Now, before we move on to the last part of today's session, I want to say thank you and summarize the panel that we've just had. So to that end, thank you to our young advocates, Kanvan, Chloe, Tamara, Camilo, Faye, and Yeshi. And I also want to thank our leaders, the input from the government of Spain and UNICEF today. We've heard issues from our panelists all around the world, such as gender inequality, the environmental crisis, violence against kids, cyber issues in the cyber world and the digital divide. But we've also seen positives. How are young people making a change in the world we live in? Looking at the setting up of NGOs and allowing for children's voice to be heard in government plans, policies, and legislation. We also, however, we also need to acknowledge the many problems that still lie ahead of us in moving on into the future. We need to continue have consistent voice from children in government plans, and we need to make sure that youth advocacy is continued on when we are no longer youth. So, moving on, we have seen how young people are taking action in different ways to achieve the SDGs. And another form in which children and young people advocate is through art. Our next young guest today is Tayata Robinson, who will be performing a poem on child activism entitled White Dwarf Stars.
Dark, blank, empty abyss, where once innocent light now devoured by hatred's mist. The smog of war, fumes of famine, and haze of droughts all suffocate the light's desperate pleas and shouts. With news of pain, hate, despair, this loss of hope, does no one care? And so I ask, what now? How can we avoid such tragic events like the murder of Floyd? It is here we live, weak and destroyed. And so I beg, where is the hope for our world within this void? But inside this vacuum, peeking through, the birth of a star illuminates blue. Piercing through the solid opaque, the small white dwarf yawns awake. It is the ambition of a child, one willing to do whatever it takes in order to solve today's mistakes. With the pain of the world as challenge, with this one child's aim to restore the balance. Climate, gender, religion, race, listen to the stars speak its case. From Malala, Thunberg to me and you, the youth are speaking, we are sharing our views. Through protests, speeches, rallies, campaigns, our stars burn strong to fight the world of pain. And although you may think we are none the wiser, our flames in fact burn much more brighter. Yes, we are young and yes, we are new, but we are white dwarf stars and we are focused on healing humanity's scars. So yes, Red Giant, you may be bigger, but times are changing and things will differ. So hear these words and hear this narration, because a lone dwarf star stands here, encouraging a constellation. So listen to me speak for the youth generation, to educate you on how we fight the void's infiltration. Thank you.
Thank you, Tayata. That was truly inspiring. To end this event today, we have a musical intervention by Sing for Hope. I'd like to introduce Monica Yunus and Camille Zamora, who will share a few words on the song Dream Big, Speak Loud before we see it performed.
Saludos a todos, un honor tremendo estar aquí con ustedes. I'm Camille Zamora and I am the co-founder of Sing for Hope.
And I'm Monica Yunus, co-founder of Sing for Hope. What a profound moment to be here with all of you today. Sing for Hope harnesses the power of the arts to create a better world. We do this through our beloved Sing for Hope Pianos program and by activating the creative spark in schools, hospitals, refugee camps, and public spaces worldwide. We do this for and with millions of global youth, including our wonderful young artist partners in today's video. And we do this because we believe that arts have an unmatched capacity to uplift, unite, and heal.
It is indeed an honor to be with your excellencies, with our dear UNICEF friends, and with our inspiring global youth on the occasion of the High Level Political Forum for our third consecutive year together with Sing for Hope's Hand to Harmony program, made possible by the International Foundation for Arts and Culture and Dr. Haruhisa Handa. In the words of our founding board member, 2006 Nobel Peace Laureate Muhammad Yunus, to create a better world, we must first imagine it. And there is no tool more powerful for honing the imagination than the arts. Global youth are using the arts to drive the Sustainable Development Goals in vital ways, inspiring our activism and illuminating the path ahead. We'd like now to introduce a special youth performance of a Sing for Hope Hand to Harmony song whose refrain is a call to action for all of us who believe in the Sustainable Development Goals. This is Dream Big, speak loud.
We all have something to overcome. Life's struggles may haunt you, but can make you undone. There are roadblocks to face, walls to push down, but you can tear through them, keep your feet on the ground.
Dream big, speak loud, let the world hear you. Dream big, speak loud.
Dream big, speak loud, and may your hopes appear now. Dream big, speak loud.
Our future is fruitful, so look ahead. Don't dwell on what wasn't, that time is dead.
Keep moving forward, don't let your dreams down. You have the power created today. Whoa. Dream big, speak loud,
let the world hear you.
dream big, speak loud. Dream big, speak loud.
May your hopes appear now.
Dream big, speak loud. If you have a passion, follow through. If you have a calling, then there's nothing that can stop you. If you have a dream, hold on. You must envision your future is strong. Dream big, speak loud.
The world hear you.
Dream big, speak loud.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dream big, speak loud. Dream big, speak loud. Dream big, speak loud.
Thank you to everyone who participated in this meeting today, and thank you to Sing for Hope for that beautiful song and presentation. It's been an eye-opening experience, and I think that throughout the presentation, we have seen from our panelists and leaders alike how important events like today are in allowing for youth advocacy and youth voice to be heard. So again, thank you for the great input from our leaders, young activists, and artists alike. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.